Dawn spills pale light through the stained glass of Westminster Abbey, catching on centuries of dust that drift like souls unsure of departure. The tourists will come later, whispering reverently, their shoes tapping against flagstones worn smooth by kings and mourners alike. But at this hour, the Abbey belongs to silence. It is not the silence of holiness. It is the hush of infection, of time holding its breath among the dead. They call it England's heart, this church of coronations and burials. Yet the heart beats on rot. Beneath the carved angels and gilded arches lies a labyrinth of vaults, layers of coffins stacked like shelves in a library of decay. More than 3,000 bodies rest here. Poets, priests, warriors, queens. The air tastes of limestone and old perfume, the mingled scent of sanctity and corruption. When the Great Plague reached London in 1665, it did not spare the Abbey. Clergy whispered that God would protect his own, but rats do not heed sermons. Infection seeped beneath the doors, followed by fear. The choir boys vanished first, sent away to the countryside, and their voices were replaced by the scrape of shovels beneath the floor. Burial did not stop when space ran out. It only became more secret. Coffins were slid into niches beside older bones, stacked upon monarchs long turned to dust. Lime was sprinkled between layers to dull the odor, but the air still carried sweetness, the cloying scent of royal decay. During later renovations, masons complained that the floor breathed. "Lift one stone," they said, and the Abbey exhaled. Beneath every slab lay not one grave, but many. An aristocrat beside a bishop, a child beside a poet, disease mingling indiscriminately among the chosen. Westminster is often described as eternal, but eternity smells faintly of mildew. Its grandeur is built upon bodies that refuse to stay still, that bloated and burst and shifted the flagstones above. Every echo here carries two notes, the hymn and the rattle. This is the story of that Abbey, not as a monument of glory, but as a mausoleum of contagion, a place where faith met flesh and lost. By the middle of the 17th century, Westminster Abbey had already become more grave than church. Each coronation merely echoed over the whisper of bones beneath. The clergy still spoke of divine order, but their sermons rose from a floor swollen with rot. The living preyed on the stomach of the dead. When plague swept through London in 1665, the Abbey stood at the edge of the infected districts, half sanctuary, half snare. The city outside reeked of tar and burning pitch, and those who could fled to the fields. Yet nobles clung to the Abbey, believing its consecrated walls immune to pestilence. They brought their dead within, paying the sextons in gold and secrecy. Burials multiplied. Every chapel, once a private shrine, became a holding place for fevered corpses. Wax tapers burned day and night to drown the smell. The organ was silenced, not out of mourning, but because the bellows pumped disease into the choir stalls. Monks and vergers collapsed between services. The air was thick enough to chew. The Dean's Journal recorded, "We bury them quickly now. The stones rise like bread." The phrase was not poetic. The ground literally swelled from the gases below. Masons cut small holes in the walls to vent the Abbey's breath, covering them with carved cherubs so visitors would not ask questions. In the Poets' Corner, where bards were meant to rest in peace, workmen laid victims 2 and 3 deep. They say the tomb of Geoffrey Chaucer shifted that summer, the lid lifted by the pressure of newcomers seeking space. No one dared open it again. As plague years faded, the Abbey resumed its ceremonies. Weddings replaced funerals, choirs sang again. Yet every footstep over those stones struck hollow. Visitors complained of dizziness, faintness, and dreams filled with the smell of roses gone sour. Physicians blamed bad air trapped beneath the vaults. The clergy blamed imagination. But the Abbey remembered. When the crypt doors close at dusk, the temperature drops sharply, as if the building draws its warmth from the congregation and hoards it underground. Standing there at twilight, one can feel the subtle movement of breath rising from below. Centuries of it, trapped, recycled, unending. Westminster Abbey is called the House of Kings, but it is also their compost. Marble hides nothing. It only teaches decay to speak politely. When plague reached the Abbey's doors, It came not as an invading army, but as a slow, invisible tide. The rats scurried through cloisters and under pews. The fleas rode the hems of noble women's gowns. The abbey's grand silence absorbed the sound of death, the way a sponge takes water. The choir still sang for a time, thin voices trembling through incense-thick air. But one by one, those voices faltered, leaving only the echo. Records from the vergers describe frantic nights when carriages arrived long after curfew, bearing shrouded shapes wrapped in velvet. Private interments, they were called. The drivers were paid not to speak. By lantern light, the bodies were lowered into the floor itself between the slabs of kings. To open the earth was to open history. The sextons joked bitterly that even the long-dead monarchs caught the sickness. Soon, the abbey's undercroft filled. The vaults beneath the nave were already crowded with medieval royalty, so new chambers were carved deeper still, hewn from clay that bled with groundwater. The diggers worked until their torches burned low, the walls sweating, the air too thin to breathe. Lime dust clung to their lashes. Some never returned to the surface. Their pay was collected by widows who had already buried too many. One of the abbey's physicians, Dr. Goddard, kept notes in a trembling Latin hand. "It is not the living that fear the pestis here, but the dead who rise within their boxes." He meant the noises, thuds and creaks beneath the flagstones, caused by coffins swelling, wood splintering, nails popping loose in the humid dark. The abbey groaned like a ship in storm. They tried sealing the vaults with lead and pitch, but the gases found new paths, whispering through cracks in the stone. The sweet, corrupted smell drifted upward during prayer. The congregation pressed handkerchiefs to their noses and prayed louder, as though piety could drown the stench. Outside, plague pits consumed the city, but within these walls, death wore silk. Even the manner of decay was different, perfumed, contained, adorned, yet the end was the same. When the fever ebbed, masons replaced the lifted slabs, sealing in the noise. New monuments rose on top of old infection, names chiseled over forgotten ones. The abbey polished itself into respectability again, but the air never cleared entirely. On damp mornings, mist gathers at knee height, as if the abbey still exhales what it cannot digest. Centuries later, restorers lowering candles through maintenance shafts reported seeing movement, a shimmer, a pulse beneath glass-sealed coffins. Condensation, officials insisted. Perhaps. Yet one worker refused to return, claiming he heard humming from below. A long, low note, like the echo of a hymn buried alive. Beneath Westminster, plague never truly died. It simply learned to sleep under marble. The abbey's grandeur was always meant to glorify monarchy, yet even crowns tarnish beneath stone. During every epidemic, the question arose, how many royal bodies truly lay undisturbed? The records are exact in ceremony, but vague in truth. The vaults that once promised eternal rest became communal catacombs, where the line between sovereign and subject blurred into one long decay. When the plague swept through London in 1665, King Charles II and his court fled upriver. But death travels faster than royal barges. It entered Westminster through servants who returned to air out the palace, through linens washed too late, through the breath of a messenger who coughed once before kneeling. Soon after, whispers spread that infection had reached the abbey's royal vaults. Inside, the bodies of centuries slept together. Edward the Confessor, the Plantagenets, the Tudors, queens whose jewels had outlasted their skin. Mourners had long imagined their remains intact, resting in state beneath marble effigies. Yet when masons opened a vault to enter another noble, they found chaos. Bones displaced, coffins cracked, wrappings slick with moisture. Disease had not cared for lineage. It bloomed in velvet and in sackcloth alike. A chronicler wrote, "Even the faces of the kings are gone to water." He was not exaggerating. Wood swelled, lead buckled, and royal flesh dissolved into the same wet soil that claimed the beggars of Cheapside. The abbey's glory was rotting from within, its saints sharing air with contagion. There are stories, rarely spoken aloud, that some coffins were moved in secret during the worst months, rolled deeper into tunnels where the vaults joined the city's catacombs. The aim was to protect them from infection, Yet the act exposed them instead, mingling sacred and profane. One clerk, writing anonymously, confessed, "We laid the king's son beside a poor mason, for there was no space nor difference between them." Later centuries brought visitors who noted strange details: corrosion on brass nameplates, melted wax seeping through cracks, a faint humming that rose when the organ played. Perhaps vibration stirred the coffins, perhaps memory did. Either way, Westminster had become an echo chamber where the dead of every rank murmured together. Even now, the Abbey refuses to keep count. Official guides recite 17 royal tombs and dozens of noble interments. But historians examining subterranean maps note many sealed corridors with no inscriptions, narrow as veins. What rests there, no one knows. If you stand above Henry VII's chapel when the rain falls, you can feel a slight tremor through the floor, a ripple underfoot like distant thunder. That is the Abbey-esque confession, the quiet reminder that kings and commoners share one kingdom after all, the Empire of Rot. When the bells of Westminster ceased, London itself seemed to lose its heartbeat. Their bronze throats, once thunder over the Thames, fell mute not from reverence but exhaustion. The ropes rotted in their pulleys, and the tower pigeons built nests where choirs of sound had lived. The absence of ringing left a vacuum that filled with whispers, stories of sickness, desecration, and the restless dead below. After the plague years, when the court returned and services resumed, the Abbey's music carried a new timbre, beauty alloyed with dread. The choristers sang to an audience invisible and innumerable, for beneath their feet lay generations who had never left. Worshippers spoke of a hum beneath the hymns, a resonance from below that no musician could claim. It was said that when the organ struck its deepest note, the vaults answered back. The Dean of Westminster, a pragmatic man, dismissed such tales as fancy, but even he recorded in his diary the odorous damp that rose each summer from between the stones. Lime and wax failed to hold it back. Servants sprinkled vinegar in the aisles, and perfumed linen hung behind the pulpit. Still, the Abbey breathed infection as it prayed for deliverance. Time dulled memory, but not entirely. When the Great Fire devoured London in 1666, smoke rolled as far as Westminster, turning the windows red and choking the cloisters. Flames never reached the Abbey, yet ash rained through its rafters for days, drifting down upon the tombs like gray snow. People called it divine mercy that the church was spared. Others wondered if mercy was what they'd truly witnessed, or if death simply recognized its own house and passed it by. In the quiet years that followed, workmen mended cracks and polished monuments. The stones gleamed again, as though repentance could be scrubbed into marble. Tourists came, priests preached, poets found inspiration in the sepulchral grandeur. But the Abbey never shed its chill. In winter, a mist coiled through the nave, curling around ankles, too deliberate to be ordinary fog. Visitors reported a faint metallic taste on their tongues, as if breathing coins. One evening, a candle left burning overnight set a tapestry smoldering. When monks rushed in to stamp out the flames, they swore the smoke carried the smell of plague years, vinegar, musk, and something sweet. They opened windows, but the scent clung for days. The city had changed. The Abbey had not. Today, that silence endures between chimes and footsteps. When the bells ring now, they ring for ceremony, not warning, but beneath the music, London still listens for the sound that once replaced faith, the hush that follows death. Work, the quiet only the living fear. The Abbey hides its secrets well, but time, like water, always finds a way through stone. In 1911, restoration workers repairing the north transept struck an unmarked cavity. When they pried loose the slab, a rush of stale air hissed upward, air that had not touched sunlight in 200 years. Inside lay coffins without names, stacked like drawers in a cabinet, the wood black with damp. Rats had tunneled through the lead, weaving nests from linen shrouds. One coffin split at the touch, spilling a cloud of dust fine as ash. The men coughed for days afterward and swore the air smelled of myrrh and rot, of holiness gone sour. They resealed the vault and told no one. But discovery breeds curiosity. Over the next decades, archaeologists petitioned to map the Abbey's undercroft. arguing that its foundations were the city's own memory. Permission came slowly, granted only in fragments. Small holes bored between slabs, fiber cameras snaked through darkness. What they saw startled them. Layer upon layer of coffins, some crushed by weight, others strangely preserved. Bones glimmered with mineral salts, turning ivory to crystal. Between them lay scraps of silk, hairpins, scraps of vellum prayers still legible through centuries of decay. One shaft revealed something older still, bones interred before the abbey's first consecration, proof that the site had been sacred long before Christianity claimed it. Pagan perhaps, or Roman. Whatever they were, they had been disturbed again, and again by later burials, mingled like generations of forgotten faiths whispering to each other through soil. In 2019, a digital scan revealed hidden corridors beneath the Henry VII Chapel, passages sealed since the 18th century. One chamber, no larger than a stable, contained 14 coffins. Their lids had melted into each other, forming a single twisted surface like frozen waves. Experts called it post-mortem deformation. The priest who inspected it called it something else, the wages of vanity. Even in death, ambition seeks to climb higher, to rest atop another soul. Modern science cataloged each vault in numbers and graphs, but emotion clung stubbornly. When historians reconstructed the air composition inside, they discovered traces of mercury and arsenic, remnants of embalming mixtures meant to cheat decay. They had failed spectacularly. The abbey's walls themselves were slowly digesting the royal dead, leaching them into the limestone. Every flake of dust that drifts through its nave carries a fraction of kings. On quiet nights, custodians claim they hear faint tapping beneath the stones, a contraction of air or perhaps a patient knocking. The old one's reminding us, one says. Maybe he is right. For Westminster was never merely a church. It is London's lung, drawing in the living and exhaling the dead. Every renovation, every discovery, every scientific triumph only proves what the Abbey has known for 9 centuries, that the past does not rest. It waits. Morning light filters through the stained glass of Westminster like a confession, painting the stones with colors borrowed from heaven. Tourists drift in, their cameras clicking softly, unaware that every echo they make wakes something older than history. Beneath their feet lie poets who wrote of eternity, queens who prayed for sons, soldiers who died for kings, all now joined in one vast congregation of silence. The Abbey does not distinguish them anymore. The air that fills its vaults has passed through both crown and beggar. Each generation adds another layer to this slow cathedral of decay. Monarchs are buried with crowns that crumble to powder, nobles with titles that mean nothing underground. Yet the Abbey endures, feeding on reverence. We visit to feel awe, but what we truly feel is proximity. To mortality, to memory, to the quiet equality that only death delivers. For centuries, Londoners believed Westminster immortal, but every stone here has absorbed fever, smoke, and sorrow. Plague, fire, and empire all left fingerprints in its mortar. In the crypts, microbes once born in rats still linger in trace form, dormant but waiting, as if history itself could relapse. The Abbey is not just a monument, it is an organism, a living reliquary that exhales the ghosts of Britain's past with every draft of cold air. Walk its nave at dusk, and you'll see dust glittering in the slanted sunbeams. Those are not motes of light. They are fragments of skin, bone, and parchment, the unending afterlife of empire. The difference between relic and residue is only reverence. What we worship is simply what we choose not to clean away. There is no truer democracy than decay. Westminster proves it. Here, kings and paupers share the same ceiling, the same air, the same slow surrender to time. Their monuments compete for beauty, but beneath the marble their bones are indistinguishable. The Abbey's greatest sermon is unspoken, that power, genius, and faith all end in dust, and dust remembers everything. Outside, the Thames murmurs as it always has, carrying soot and sunlight past the walls that have seen 9 centuries of coronations and funerals. From the first plague cart to the last royal procession, the river has borne witness. It knows the truth carved into Westminster's foundations, that the empire never ended, it merely changed form. It lives now in particles, in echoes, in the soft breath of those who still walk these aisles and mistake its ghosts for history. If this story followed you into the dark tonight, let it stay. Leave a thought for those who built beauty from ruin, who turned death into architecture. And if you wish to keep walking through the labyrinth of forgotten truths, subscribe, listen, and remember. Because some truths deserve to be remembered, no matter how much they hurt.